everyone, and welcome to another edition of ISSA Talk. I'm Erin Mahoney, VP of Product over here at ISSA, and today we're talking yoga with a very special guest, Jacob McGlendon, who is a master trainer, Reebok athlete, certified yoga instructor, and also has a full-time role at the executive level with Les Mills US. So I'm thrilled to have you here. I've known you for a while, Jacob. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to do this.
I am too. And I'm excited to talk about this topic with you, Jacob, because you're so well-rounded and yoga is just one of the many certifications that you have. You really can speak to how that fits into different fitness professionals' career and how even it could work for a participant. So what do you say we get started?
Let's do it.
So let's start, Jacob, kind of just with you and your story. What made you decide to become a yoga instructor, and what did that journey look like for you?
Oh, wow. It's actually interesting. My first bout into yoga was through Les Mills programming. It was Body Flow, which is our yoga, tai chi, and Pilates fusion class. And I actually went through it simply because I have a background in gymnastics. So mobility and something was always very natural for me. But the club I was working with at the time was adding the programs and just wanted a male. So I was in a situation where the owner said, hey, we're going to pay for you to go through the training, go through it. It was a new venture for me. I didn't know what I was doing quite at the first, but then I quickly fell in love with it. Because one of the factors that I always focused on in my personal training and training with my clients when I was working with them was that of mobility, relaxation, and recovery. And, too many times people focus on, the heavy weightlifting, the cardio element, but they really let the other stuff go. And, adding yoga into the practice was pretty eye-opening to me to benefit myself, but then also any of the participants in classes or individual clients I was working with at the time.
That's pretty cool. So it wasn't like you just raised your hand and said, hey, I'm pretty good at this. Let me be a yoga instructor. I'm the next Jacob Yogi.
No, it wasn't at all. And it's funny, my entire career has been kind of that situation where it was like, very seldom did I actually just say, hey, this looks really cool. I'm gonna put my hand up for it. It was kind of a selection-based process of where I was sitting in my career growth and my journey. But, anytime I found something that I really, really had a passion about, I always doubled down on it. And yoga just happened to be one of those. And, that was the first thing that actually got me into the trainer role with Les Mills was for Body Flow. It was the yoga-based element. So a lot of times in the Les Mills world, I'm known for some of our kickboxing programs and weightlifting. But yeah, the mind-body portion was actually the initial passion and the initial project that got me into the steps to working with these guys.
That's very cool. Personally, not exactly the same, but similarly, I took the ISSA certified yoga instructor exam. And I've never been a yoga person before. I've always been more like high intensity resistance training, corrective exercise kind of stuff. And I just fell in love with it right away. And I never would have guessed that I would have. So it sounds like there are, if you're kind of like that and I'm kind of like that, there's probably other people out there like that.
Yeah, 100%. Like for me, like a typical, I'll say like a guy, like I went into it with the stigma of what I thought yoga really was. In my envisionment, it was people speaking in Sanskrit, doing things and certain things, which obviously there's components to that in yoga, but I think so little of the industry actually has a broader span knowledge of where can yoga actually be implemented? What can it be done with? Is it sport specific? Is it recovery specific? Is it vinyasa and movement specific? So there's so many different applications of what yoga actually looks like. And as people learn more about how they can implement that into their classes, their training sessions, stuff, it opens a lot of windows.
Perfect timing, because that was going to be my next question is talk a little bit about, how this might look for just a personal trainer that might be able to, could they incorporate it? And then maybe just a traditional group exercise instructor, how can it fit into these other roles?
Yeah, so if we talk about warm-ups or cool downs, I think a lot of yoga-based movements for progression of movement and, starting to create a warm-up based movement can be plugged and played there. Also the recovery element from post cardio workouts or post high intensity workouts. So in the individual training spaces, I think when you understand yoga and you understand really how the body moves mechanically, it allows you to work better with your participants and your clients when it comes to stretchology and things like that are actually going to show them to. Then it also adds other components to your training categories that you can do with isometric training, body weight movement training. Some movements in the warrior position of yoga poses, they're strenuous, right? They can be very taxing and challenging. So when it comes to, creating a load on the muscle, it's pretty applicable.
Totally agree. And you said something at the beginning that was pretty interesting about the mechanics of yoga and when you understand it. And then previously, before that comment, you were talking about, hey, it's not all Sanskrit. And
Yeah.
I think those 2 points are really important because a lot of people might kind of think, oh, this is just, this one like certain weird section of fitness and it doesn't totally apply. I'm an exercise science person. I know biomechanics, but yoga really helps a lot with some of those overactive muscles like your lats and your hip flexors, right?
Agreed. Even if you look at most people's cool downs or when they're doing like, hard point stretches, theoretically, a lot of those are yoga based positions anyway, right? So it's just that we're calling them in different words or using different terminology. Like for me, I've got multiple yoga certifications, ISSA being one, but it's just, I've never taught a class utilizing Sanskrit and terminology because I'm trying to make it to a broader spectrum of user, whereas that's how I've chose to do my practice, right? Some people focus on very, very yoga specific training. They like that feel and they like that genre. But for me, it's always been about, if I'm looking at my entire business as a trainer or as an instructor, how can I captivate a bigger audience? And how can I captivate people that are sitting inside and outside of individual niches? And that was the way that I used it as more or less a net to really gravitate more people into my classes.
It's like we scripted this because you were talking about using the English words, but I think that's important because of it's a form of fitness that can apply to so many people. So why make it exclusive and make it so that you need to learn these extra words? Why not make it inclusive, science-backed, and as a supplement to other formats of exercise that people might be doing, right?
100% agree. I mean, it's, I think it's just education of the user, right? Because even if you look at cardio specific people, you have a lot of people that all they want to do is run, all they want to do is cardio, but they're losing the components of, say, strength training, or they're losing the components of yoga when it comes to mobility training. So it's really educating your participants on why, why are we doing this particular thing and how is it going to benefit you entire process, not just that one individual component of what you're looking for.
So we've talked a little bit about, for fitness professionals, how they can fit it into their group exercise formats or how personal trainers can incorporate it into their warm-ups, their cool downs with their clients. What about just a regular member? What would be the benefit for them, a member participant, for them to become a certified yoga instructor, do you think?
I think the understanding, right? For me, I'm very big on education. There's tons of certifications and processes and things I've went through that I usually don't use in applicable training process, just because I wanted to understand more of the why. And, for a lot of your participants that are looking at it, if they can understand more of how does this tie into this and how does it benefit the next level of my training, for me, the more understanding that anybody has, whether it becomes an instructor or a participant, it's just the better well-rounded you're going to be, and the better you're going to be able to apply that to your everyday life. Right? Because for me, it's about preparing for life, right? So I'm not always training for an athletic event or a Reebok special event. It's, it's like, how am I getting better to where I can chase kids around the parking lot? How can I chase kids around the playground? Am I flexible and mobile enough to bend and play? And that's a huge part of what me is just life, right? It's life preparation and life training.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody should be doing it. And yoga is actually one of those group fitness formats that's been just like fitness. There's trends. And yoga has just been very prevalent the entire time. It's always stayed strong. It's always had a lot of participants. It's not really going up and down. Can you talk about maybe why you think that is?
I think it's because it's different, right? It is different on a whole. I mean, because even if you take a yoga class, be it a vinyasa specific class or an Ashtanga specific class or something that's like a heated element, there's still differences in it. It sits outside of just like a normal cardio regime or a normal weightlifting regime. And then also, I think the barrier to entry sometimes isn't as high, depending on where you're taking yoga. It's not as scary to some people because they're not like, oh, I gotta move to this music or this beat, and I gotta lift these heavy weights. So it's I think the entry level is a little bit easier for some people, and that's why it's easier to gravitate and it stays steady in the industry. Let's take HIIT, for example. That scares the hell out of some people, right? So it's a matter of, it is. It scares me sometimes.
I know.
So it's a matter of, so you step back, you go, whoa, maybe not yet, So I think whereas that one, it's simply the understanding or the knowledge that sits out there is not that it's easier, but it's more applicable at a user-friendly level. And then you can obviously elevate your studies and your training higher, or you can always pull back. So there's lots of options in yoga as far as that sit very well with where the participant is.
I never really thought about it that way, but you're entirely accurate. There's such a lower barrier of entry, and it's much less intimidating for the average person that maybe hasn't stepped foot into a gym, maybe even ever. It just feels, a lot more welcoming. So that's great.
Yeah,
Let's
it's kind of interesting on that side. Just to add another insight. So Les Mills, obviously, we're very big in data globally of what's happening, and that's what we see is the most digested digital based programming out there is that of yoga and mind body stuff. So it's showing that the barrier to entry is quite a bit lower. So knowing that as a trainer or a fitness instructor, there's a lot of people that are looking for those particular solutions. It's just a matter of how are you specifically using them to, I guess I'll use the term, benefit your training and your classes and your category and your clients.
Yep. So let's transition a little bit, knowing that you've been in the fitness industry forever. I have too. Look at us. And knowing
gray hairs, yeah.
I know. So knowing that there's all these different certifications out there for yoga, different teacher training, most of them are hour based. The ISSA one offers an accredited exam. So kind of talk through your perspective on yoga certifications and a great avenue for somebody that might not be certified, what they could get out of it.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there when you talk about some of the hour certifications. For me, it's like the mastery thing. Obviously, you have to practice something quite a bit before you can perform it properly and work through the mechanics properly. But when it comes down to yoga, the most important thing to me is, do you understand the whys and the mechanics, right? Do you understand why you're asking people to do it? Do you understand how the body's moving? Because at the end of the day, you're asking people to stack and disalign joints, right? You're asking them to wrap apparatus. So it's the coaching model is very crucial. You have to be very clear in how you're explaining things to people to where they can understand it. Like for me, from the trainer rep's perspective for Les Mills, one of the things I would do is if I can close my eyes and listen to you or look the other way and understand exactly what you're asking me to do, that to me is a really great instructor or a really good trainer. Whereas somebody that can say a scan script terminology or throw out the name of a pose, that's great if you have a room full of participants that are very knowledgeable and have been there a lot longer. But, I would look for a certification basis that teaches you at a foundational level that really shows you the whys, the hows, and the coaching elements of what you're doing. Because I teach every class based off of a beginner class, right? When it comes to coaching elements. So I'll layer in a foundation level to where anybody that's first time in the room or a seasoned veteran of that particular modality can understand what I'm asking them to do. And then once that gets moving, I do what I call coach to the 75. I'll scan my room, and where 75% of the class sits, that's where my coaching is going to maintain. Now, I'll offer some options that are higher or lower for participants that need it. But, it gets to the point, especially in yoga, to where if you're doing handstands and those kind of basic movements, and most of your class do it, are you now doing it to show off as the instructor, or are you doing it for the benefit of the class? And that's a big equation that I take into play.
Yeah, I've seen some of that happening, and that's, that's kind of that exclusive, like it's about us. You said two things that I appreciated. One is, first one is, it sounds like the hours that you're interacting with yoga and, whether it's been 200 or 500 or whatever, aren't necessarily as important as can you convey the knowledge, skills, and abilities that an entry-level instructor has to do. And there's all of those coaching pieces to it, right?
I 100% think so. I've met some people that have went through 500-hour certifications, 200-hour certifications, but frankly, the class just wasn't very impressive, right? It wasn't something that I would engage in. And I watch, like if I'm reviewing a class, be it whatever modality, whoever I'm working with, that's the first thing I do is start to watch the participants. I watch their movement. And if it's not aligned with what the instructor is telling them or asking them to do, there's a disconnect. So a lot of times, just because we've practiced something so many times or done something so many things, we instantly think that's certification material, where it's much, much more than that, right? It always comes back to how are you conveying that information, and do you understand why you're asking them to do that information? Because once you understand the why that you're asking your participants to do it, you're going to coach it differently, right? Because you're understanding the breakdown of the mechanics and what's going to happen to them physically, emotionally, spiritually through those movements.
Yes. All of those things are great and really apply to fitness in general. And you said something interesting too, that one of the individuals at Reebok that we chatted with before was saying, Kevin, he was saying that they did an activity where you couldn't use your words to coach a class. And so trying to train or trying to conduct an entire session with not even being able to use your words was pretty impressive. But you kind of touched on that when you were talking about all the different ways of coaching people, and are they able to execute the movements that you ask? And that's, that's something that you have to learn over time.
Oh, that one takes time. I mean, we have different terminology that I use for it. I call it body part and direction based cueing, right? So if I'm showing you physically what needs to happen, number one, and this is where some of the 200, 500-hour certifications do benefit, because theoretically, the more practice I've had at doing it myself, I can perform it better. but now it's how do you channel that in once again? And you know, teaching comes, it's not just this, right? It's not just verbally, it's how are you doing it auditory? How are they visually watching you? So it's taking into consideration all those different components of how people learn and applying that into your instruction.
Yes. All right, Jacob. Well, thank you for joining us. It's to sum it up, it sounds like yoga's broad. It's the lowest barrier of entry for anybody interested in fitness and can platform them to other things. And there is that practical application, but really knowing that you are achieving these entry level requirements as seen through an accredited certification is really important to keep people safe, coach them, and get the results they want, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And you know, if for anybody that's out there that's looking at additional certifications to layer into their belt, I would give this a strong consideration simply because of how many different avenues you can apply this type of training into group fitness classes, into personal training sessions. You know, the more you understand about the body movements and stretching mobility, because at the end of the day, a more mobile muscle is a stronger muscle, right? It's a more powerful muscle. So I think taking those components of yoga really, really open up avenues of everything that's going on. I mean, we see one big thing that's hot in the industry right now is recovery, right? Well, a big part of recovery is actually what you do with mobility, right? So it's tying those two in together and really staying on the trends of what's happening in the industry is what keeps you really sharpening the market. One thing I've always prided myself on, and anybody I worked with in the industry on mentorship, was don't be the one trick pony. You know, be very good at a lot of stuff, master of nothing. That way you can work with a broader spectrum of clients and participants and relate to them on a knowledge basis. And I think yoga has a great ability to allow you to do that.
I do too. All right, everybody. Thank you, Jacob, for joining us. This was part 1. Next, we're going to talk about part 2. Have an awesome day. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Awesome.